Jesus' diet did not involve restrictive fad diets, trendy superfoods, or concerns about calories. And yet he crossed deserts, walked between cities for entire days, fasted for long periods, and kept his mind and body in full activity. His body supported not only the physical journey, but also the weight of spiritual missions and intense political conflicts. At a time when there were no vitamin supplements or laboratories developing protein formulas, he survived and led with a diet deeply connected to nature, local culture, and above all, the purpose of his mission. The question that echoes then is inevitable. Could it be that Jesus' eating style carried such a perfect natural nutritional plan that it would upset the interests of modern industry? If topics such as history, culture, and the little explored mysteries behind the life of Jesus interest you, subscribe to the channel. Here, each video reveals what many prefer to keep hidden, with depth, evidence, and critical thinking. It's not just a religious issue. It is historical, anthropological, and perhaps strategic. Palestine from the 19th century before Christ to the 1st century after Christ was a territory with unique characteristics. Semi-arid soil, but fertile in certain regions, rivers like the Jordan that supported local fishing, and trade routes that brought spices and ingredients from as far away as Egypt, Mesopotamia, and even India. Despite living under Roman domination, the Jews maintained a food culture marked by ancient traditions, based on a simplicity that to modern eyes could be seen as restrictive, but which, when analyzed closely, reveals a sophisticated dietary awareness. Jesus was born and raised in this scenario. Son of a carpenter, inhabitant of a rural village called Nazareth, his diet was aligned not only with the available resources but also with the cultural and spiritual principles of the Hebrew people. Bread was central, not as a villain, as many treat it today, but as a symbol of sustenance. It was consumed daily, made with wheat or barley, fermented naturally. Olive oil was more than an ingredient. It was medicine. It was a sign of blessing. The fish, frequently mentioned in the Gospels, came from the Sea of Galilee, which supplied much of the region and represented one of the pillars of the local economy and diet. Contrary to what many imagine, Jesus' diet was not based on abundance, but on purpose. His meals were marked by moderation, by rituals, by intentionality. He didn't eat out of anxiety or for momentary pleasure. Each meal had meaning, context, and communion, and this contrasts brutally with current eating patterns, marked by excess, industrialization, and immediacy. Today, with shelves full, people suffer from deficiencies. In Jesus' time, with simple resources, there was balance. Choosing natural, seasonal, and minimally processed foods was not a nutritional marketing strategy, but a direct consequence of a way of life centered on the earth, seasonality, and respect for the body as a temple. This simplicity, which today could be called ancestral nutrition, seems to confront a current model based on mass production and unbridled consumption. The dietary structure followed by Jesus reveals more than a menu. It exposes a lifestyle that challenges the pillars of the industry that profits from addictions, imbalances, and silent illnesses. The gospel accounts make it clear that for Jesus, the act of eating was never just a biological function. Eating was a gesture loaded with spiritual, cultural, and pedagogical intention. The meals he shared were not simple breaks from everyday life, but moments of teaching, inclusion, and often provocation. As Jesus sat at the table with tax collectors, prostitutes, and Pharisees, he didn't just eat, he taught. And the foods present on these tables say a lot about your worldview, your body, and your mission. Bread, for example, is mentioned with almost liturgical frequency. When Jesus presents himself as the bread of life, he is not just using a metaphor, he is establishing a deep connection between physical and spiritual nutrition. The bread he distributed among the crowds was barley, a cereal that was easy to grow, rich in fiber and highly nutritious. This multiplication was not a miracle for ostentation, but out of necessity, a response to the real hunger of people exhausted, marginalized, and forgotten by political and religious systems. The food he offered was simple but complete. It did not seduce the eyes but sustained the soul. Another central element was the fish. Both in early Christian symbolism and in the region's food reality, fish was a constant presence. Fishermen made up the base of his followers, and fishing was not just a profession, but survival. The Sea of Galilee, where tilapia, sardines, and carp came from, was an abundant source of lean protein, fatty acids, and essential minerals. And interestingly, the conservation techniques of the time, such as salt and drying in the sun, preserved food naturally, without chemical additives or artificial preservatives. The food was nourishing without intoxicating. At the wedding of Cana, wine is the protagonist. Jesus turns water into wine, but what few highlight is that this wine was not like the wine found in supermarkets today. It was diluted with water, consumed in moderation and associated with celebration, not escape from reality. He was a symbol of joy, yes, but also of alliance, of memory. Even at final meals, like supper with the disciples, each element on the table had purpose. Wine represented blood, bread represented body, and together they fed faith. Nothing about his diet was random. The Gospels do not detail menus by chance. Jesus' food choices were based on local availability, Jewish culture, which prohibited unclean foods, and principles of simplicity and functionality. He knew what his body needed to withstand the pressures of the desert, the nights without shelter, and the intense days of teaching among crowds. I wasn't looking for performance. I was looking for purpose. And perhaps, precisely for this reason, your diet is so surprisingly effective today. In contrast to this sacred and functional relationship with food, the modern world has built a food chain based on excess, manipulation, and dependence. While Jesus ate out of necessity and meaning, today we eat out of anxiety, marketing, and conditioned habit. Today's food industry doesn't just provide food, it manufactures desire. And this desire, in many cases, is designed never to be satisfied. The simplicity of Jesus' diet, wholemeal bread, pure olive oil, fresh fruit, salted fish, would, under contemporary logic, be a commercial risk. After all, consuming what can be harvested, fished, or prepared without intermediaries does not generate billions in profits. Ultra-processed foods, which today dominate market shelves, were designed not to nourish but to addict. Formulas with high concentrations of sugar, fat, and additives create brain stimuli that confuse the natural signals of satiety and pleasure. It is a system that operates on the basis of hyperpleasure and that encourages continuous consumption, even when the body is already overloaded. There is no room for fasting, listening to one's own organism, or gratitude, practices that Jesus incorporated into his lifestyle naturally. Fasting, in its context, was both a spiritual exercise and a form of physical realignment. Today, fasting is sold as a weight loss strategy, but rarely as a discipline of freedom. Furthermore, there is a profound disconnect between what is consumed and what is understood as food. Jesus knew where every ingredient he put on the table came from. He knew the fisherman, the farmer, and the oil potter. He ate with his hands what had been produced with his hands. In the current scenario, many consume products that have gone through factories, laboratories, and sophisticated packaging, but carry very little nutritional value and almost no history. Food stopped being an experience and became a product. It stopped being a seed and became marketing. This rupture is not just an individual choice. It is a system model. A system that directly opposes the dietary logic that Jesus lived. In it, eating stopped being an act of connection and became a process of alienation. What Jesus did with bread and fish, feeding crowds, teaching principles, and restoring dignity, today is done with plasticized products that feed little but generate enormous profits. There is a silent irony in all of this. The further from natural a food is, the more expensive and valued it becomes. The closer to the land, the station, and the body, the simpler and more marginalized it is. What Jesus ate is not suitable for advertising campaigns because it does not need to be sold, just experienced. The simplicity of Jesus' diet was not a limitation, but a form of freedom. He wasn't trapped by artificially intensified flavors. He wasn't held hostage by timed eating times. nor did he need to read labels to know if something was healthy. His bond with food was direct, almost intimate. He shared what was there, gave thanks before consuming, and used the act of eating as a tool for reconnection with God, with others, and with himself. This model, ignored or discredited for a long time, is now beginning to be rediscovered in niches of people who seek real health, far from fad diets and closer to the earth, time, and consciousness. There are communities that have been trying to revive ancestral and biblical eating practices, not out of religious nostalgia, but out of a real need for healing. They are returning to growing their own food, avoiding ultra-processed foods, consuming less, and being more present. Some of these people don't even have faith in the traditional sense, but they sense that there is something valuable in rediscovering what is essential. It is curious to realize that, in a world saturated with information about nutrition, longevity, and biohacking, the most balanced answer may be found in practices lived 2,000 years ago by a man who wore sandals, ate with his hands, and chose to fast instead of stuffing himself. Jesus' food logic challenges more than the industrial system. It challenges the ego. It forces you to reflect on what really satiates you. It shows that the body is sustained not by excess, but by balance. That health is not just in the nutrients, but in the intention with which you eat. Jesus valued food but never turned it into an idol. He knew how to stop. I knew how to share. I knew how to thank you before consuming. This stance, in a time where food has become a compulsion and status, is revolutionary. And perhaps that is precisely what the industry does not want to promote. A lifestyle where people eat less, with more intention, with more gratitude. Where food does not generate profit but autonomy. Where the body doesn't need supplements but rest, silence, and real food. Jesus didn't come into the world to teach recipes, but his way of eating can be one of the greatest lessons about what it means to live fully. Not surprisingly, the last thing he did before being betrayed was supper. And there, by breaking bread, he was not just anticipating his death. He was sealing an alliance with life in its purest form, simple, shared, and sufficient. If you value content that combines history, spirituality, and critical thinking, take the opportunity to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. This helps this type of research reach more people. And that's it, because in the next video we will continue uncovering topics that almost no one is talking about, but that make all the difference.